week. So then one is more likely not to be charitable, not to be kind to others. Now, it's very hard for our modern ears to hear that, because we think intrinsically everybody is a good person. And therefore should not be negated by the diet. But the Talmud is convinced that the food we consume influences us morally and spiritually. So throughout the ages, the Jewish people have had a separate diet. Listed among the animals and birds and fish in this week's Parsha are those which are permitted and those which are forbidden. And some foods have become the symbol of evil, such as food from a pig or meat from a carnivorous animal. So there are a lot of questions that have arisen. I don't want to give you a general idea about kashrus. First of all, vegetarianism. Is that a Jewish ideal? One would think that the easiest way to observe the laws of kashrus is to eat bran flakes your whole life. And yet, the Torah says, for instance, that in celebration of the Sholosh Regalim, the 3 holidays of the year, so ein simcha ela b'basar v'yayin. One should drink wine and eat meat. Nevertheless, throughout Jewish history, there's been a strain of vegetarianism that exists, based on the fact that the Medrash teaches us that until the time of Noah, human beings were not carnivorous. They did not eat meat. So in essence, you had 1,500 years of civilization that were vegetarians. And when you have the idea of a nazir, someone who takes a vow, so he will not drink wine or eat meat for a period of time. So that seems to be a higher sense of spirituality. So therefore, throughout Jewish history, we have had great people who basically were vegetarians, even if they did not advocate it as a way of life for others. Now, the type of kashrus that we have today has never been in effect in the Jewish world throughout our history. In our time, kosher is moved from the home and the private kitchen to the industrial factory. And that's a great sea change in life and a great change in how we look at kashrus. When I was a child, which was a long time ago, I remember in our home, my mother had salting boards, and she had basins to soak the chicken, and we would go to the butcher, and the butcher sold you a live chicken. My mother never liked to take me because she was afraid I would become attached to the chicken. And in the back, there was a room that was covered with sawdust, and there was a shochet there. So you bought the chicken in the front, you went to the back, he paid the shochet, whatever it was, and he slaughtered the chicken. Then you had to go home with the chicken. You had to defeather it. And then you had to soak and salt it to remove the blood. And then you could get down to business as to what you were going to do with the chicken. And I remember that every Wednesday when I was a child, the whole day was occupied with the chicken because we had to get ready for Shabbat. So you had to go and buy the chicken and have the chicken slaughtered. That's not even within the realm of memory today. I remember when one of the first shocks that I had when I was the head of the OU is when I saw Empire chickens, and I saw how the chickens were industrialized. It's the way it's done today. You have 8 or 10 or 12 shachtim that stand on a line, and there's a moving line that has the chickens, and each shechet takes a chicken and slaughters and slaughters and slaughters. And then there's automatic defeathering. So we always used to have a problem with that. Because to really defeather the chicken, you have to use hot water. You cannot use hot water on a chicken before it is soaked and salted, because the hot water will cook the blood into the chicken that you won't be able to get it out. So in the United States, there were companies that processed chickens, and they had the rabbinic certification that would defeather with hot water. And they claimed that the water was not that hot. In other words, it was hot enough to defeather the chicken, but not hot enough to cook the blood into the chicken. That's a very slippery slope. And we never approved of it. I remember that there was a company in America that processed chickens that way and wanted the OU, and we did not agree to certify it. And we were sued by the company for discrimination. And we had a trial in front of a federal judge on whether or not hot water can be used to defeather chickens. And he had to testify about the halakha, what's involved here. I remember I spent weeks witness on that trial. We had a very clever lawyer, a non-Jew. The Jews always represented the other side. I say the Jews are on the side of the chicken. So we had a very clever attorney. So one of the things that be discussed is how hot is hot, the water. So the Talmud advances a criteria that if you put your hand on the hot water, would your hand get burned? Yad Solet is spoken. If your hand would get burned, then it's too hot. So as an expert witness, the company brought in their certifying rabbi, who was a very nice man. And he was a European. And the attorney then brought in a bowl of hot water from the factory and asked him to put his hand in it. And that pretty much ended the case. So a discovery in the 1950s, because kashrus is based on the technology, on scientific discovery. But is that cold water will also defeather the chicken. But the cold water has to be between a certain number of degrees Fahrenheit. And therefore we were able to regulate the water. And then they invented a robot that would beat the chicken. And in beating the chicken, the feathers would fall off. And then they invented a machine that salted the chicken. And it did a better job than any human being. See, a human being at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is tired. The robot is never tired. And then there was a machine that soaked the chicken, and it was all on a timer. And it was remarkable. Everything was done perfect. But there were no human beings. So it's a chicken that is processed by machine, kosher. So you got to wrap your mind around it, because you're not going to find that in the Shulchan Aruch. Because in the 16th century, there were no machines to process chickens. So much of modern day kashrus is, so to speak, the discovery of things in uncharted waters. And therefore, there's a whole different approach to it. Now, and I was in the yeshiva, again, a long time ago. So in order to receive rabbinic ordination, to receive smicha, you had to study your day, and you had to know it very well. And your day is divided into numerous sections. The first section has to do with shchita, with slaughtering the chicken. And the second part is trephus, the autopsy on the chicken or the cow. The third is regarding soaking and salting to remove the blood. And then there's the question of it mixes into other things, and it's a question of meat and milk. So we had to study intensively all of these 5 sections because they were all practical. They all existed in your home. I remember even when I became a rabbi, I still had women that brought me their chickens on Friday morning because they saw what they thought was an anomaly in the chicken that maybe the chicken wasn't kosher. And I remember after a while, as the processed chickens became more and more popular, and that became practically the only way. And the government banned the backyard slaughtering, the agriculture department. So when that happened, you had this industrialized chicken before you, and it had rabbinic certification. But I still had women that brought me chickens. And I would say to them, you know, the chicken is dead, it's soaked, it's salted, it's been taken apart. What can I do? What's the question here? And she would say, my mother used to bring her chickens to the rabbi. I'm going to bring chickens to the rabbi. But my children never saw that. If you tell this story to my grandchildren, they think you're from Mars. So in today's rabbinic ordination courses in many yeshivas, these things are not studied anymore because it was left to the experts. So trephus is left over to the expert on the line that looks at every lung of the sphere and decides whether it's kosher or not. But the consumer never sees that anymore. It's not his problem. So you have here a complete change of how to look at things. And then you have a question of ingredients, of products. Very few foods today are unadulterated, don't have a mixture of something in it. Currently in the United States, the Secretary of Health is trying to make a crusade to determine what people eat or don't eat, what effect that has upon us. But no one in the yeshiva world today studies soaking and salting because of the fact it's all done automatically. You don't even see it. Now, is that a positive development or not? Well, everything that is time saving and money saving is viewed in the modern world as a positive development. The rabbis had a concept Shema Yahzor Adover Lusuro. Maybe the problem that doesn't exist anymore, maybe it will arise again because of things that we don't know. Circumstances will change. And therefore, we should keep in line the traditions that existed before, even though now that all of this is done by robots, we don't have to worry about it. So there are, so it reflects itself in various ways. We're just coming past the great Yom Tov. So in the 1860s, almost 200 years ago, in Austria, they invented a machine that bakes matzahs. And this touched off a debate which still exists in certain parts of the Jewish world today, whether or not these machine matzahs are to be used on Pesach. Now, in my experience, the machine matzahs are more likely to be kosher than the hand matzahs. Because again, hand matzahs are dependent on human stamina, let's put it that way. So if you can buy hand matzahs that are manufactured 7 in the morning, they're more likely to be of the quality that you want than those that are at 4 in the afternoon. It's just common sense, to use a phrase that's popular. So the question arose, should Jews use machine matzahs or not? There were great rabbis on both sides of the issue. And today, again, pretty much accepted that machine matzahs may be used. There are people that make a compromise that for the Seder, they use hand matzahs because there's no question that our ancestors in Egypt did not use machine matzah. But that's just an example of a different attitude towards kosher food. And as it became bigger and bigger business, you have to remember that all of this was private. In the 1600s, there was no Yehuda matzahs. Everybody baked off their own matzahs. So I have a wonderful story that I tell. That I had a very good friend, Rabbi Paperman, Zichrono Livrocha, and he was a chaplain in the American Army in the Second World War. He was the chaplain for the Sixth Army, which fought in Italy. And he told me that it was February, and he had put in an order with the Jewish Welfare Board in the United States to send them matzahs for the Jewish American troops. And he was going to have a Seder for 5,000 Jewish American soldiers in the train station in Rome. So he should send them, I don't know, 2 ton, 3 ton of matzah, whatever. It's February, the end of February, It's March. It's the middle of March. No matzahs. And so he panicked. And he went to see the commanding general of the Sixth Army, Mark Clark. And he explained the situation to him. So Clark immediately picked up the phone and he called in the quartermaster general of the Sixth Army, who was an Italian non-Jew. And he said, Captain Paperman has this problem. Help him solve the problem. So the quartermaster general said, no problem. I'll bake him all the matzahs he wants. Paperman doesn't know what to do with himself. Finally, at the beginning of April, the matzahs from America arrived. And they had this great Seder in the train station in Rome, 5,000 of Jewish American soldiers. And all the generals, the whole brass, everybody came to the Seder. And General Clark is sitting at the head. The quartermaster general is next to him. And it comes time for matzah, and they distribute matzah to everybody. And the quartermaster general takes a bite of the Jewish Welfare Board matzahs, and he says out loud, mine are better. So it's a very complicated field. My final comment would be that I don't think there's ever been as much kosher food for Jews to eat as there is today. And I don't think that the level of kashrus has ever been as high as it is today. And that's due, again, to industrial processes, changes, economies, all sorts of things affected. But the basic idea of L'avdil eschem, that I separate you, that lies at the heart of the matter, and that's what makes the observance of kashrus the hallmark of Jewish life. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Have a great Shabbat. Our Pirkei Avos class begins tomorrow, 45 minutes before Mincha.
Excellent.
Shabbat shalom.
Always enjoy it.